Right, as you can see, my name's Marion Oliver, and I've got an impressive lot of letters, which don't mean a thing now. In my professional life, I worked as a clinical psychologist for the health service for the whole of my time. I retired many, many years ago. My other claim is that I'm also a GIST patient. 15 years ago, I was diagnosed and treated, and so I bring together two lots of expertise, I hope, this afternoon. Everything I have to say will apply not only to the GIST patients amongst you that are sitting there, but also to your families, those people sitting alongside you. Because when we get a diagnosis of cancer, it doesn't just affect the patient, it affects everybody around them. It affects the parents who have to look at their child suffering. It affects the children who look at a parent and not knowing what's going on. And of course it affects the other half, whoever that may be, who's there to try and support as best they can. My aim this afternoon is to show you that however badly you may think you're doing, however difficult it is to cope, you're actually doing really rather well. I'm going to touch on an awful lot of difficult subjects, some of which we skirted around a little bit this morning, but will be mentioned a bit more clearly this afternoon, and I hope that doesn't upset anybody. After all, the diagnosis of cancer is huge. It has a massive impact upon us, both physically and psychologically, almost as bad as a bereavement. It works.
O ye of little faith.
First, you are the expert. You know more about you than anybody else. You know what what's happened to you, what your experience has been, what you've learnt. You know what you think, you know what you do, you know what you like and what you don't like and what suits you best. And you must not be afraid to plug into that knowledge at all times during your GIST journey. There is no single right way of coping. At best, we do what we can manage at the time, and at the early days, sometimes that's not a lot. We're absolutely poleaxed by the news that we've received, and we're having to try and pull ourselves together as best we can. So be kind, be gentle with yourself. I should touch on a few of the coping strategies, some of which are better than others. At any time during your journey, you may feel any of those things that I've put up. First of all, of course, at the time of diagnosis, that's the big punch in the stomach. But also at odd times off and on, when you go for the scan or you get the results and the results aren't quite what you wanted. At times when you have those funny symptoms and you don't know quite what they are about, you worry that it's just coming back or getting bigger. We're fraught with worry throughout. And for many of us, when we're diagnosed, the first thing we experience is shock. Diagnosis for many of us came out of the blue. We were perfectly well, or so we thought, and we end up in hospital, and for whatever reason, we have a scan or something, and they find that we've got something growing, and it's called cancer. For others, of course, it all comes as a bit of a relief. They've had symptoms for ages, and nobody's taken them seriously. Nobody's done anything about it. It's not been investigated. So to have somebody listen and do something and to give you a diagnosis is actually a huge relief, because it actually means that now that something can be done, you may be actually getting the right treatment that you need. Very early on, a lot of people report feeling absolutely numb, frozen, unbelieving. Usually that phase doesn't last terribly long, but for some of us it can hang on for a while and we just don't feel anything. We're just like walking zombies, robots going through life, unable to get our heads around what actually is going on around us. But then that's followed by disbelief. No, it can't be me. I don't have cancer. That happens to other people. Swiftly followed by fear of actually, yeah, it is me. I have got cancer. And then, oh my goodness, what is going to happen? What is going to happen in the short term? What treatments am I going to face? Is my hair going to fall out? Am I going to be really poorly? Is the treatment going to work? Fear of the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen. Fear of the future. Do I even have a future? There is a considerable amount of uncertainty surrounding the diagnosis. We don't know what's going to happen in the short term or the long term, and some of us will cope better with this than others. Some of us are able to go with the flow, take each day as it comes, and just be confident that we're in the best possible hands and we'll just do as we're told and that leave them to do the worrying. And if you're one of those, I envy you, and probably a lot of other people envy you as well. For many of us, it feels very, very unsafe and uncertain. We feel insecure. But as came out this morning, and I want to repeat my own story, a lot of our insecurities and our feelings of unsafety can be helped by who is looking after us. If we feel that we're in the hands of experts who know exactly what we're doing, it takes away some of the big unknowns. I was lucky enough to be treated by Professor Wall in Sheffield at Weston Park. And when the first appointment I went to see her, I had been told that I had a 2 in 3 chance that my GIST would return. And as far as I was concerned, this was the beginning of the end. She saw me and she went through all the papers with me and she looked at what had happened. And she said, well, no, it's not that bad at all. It's at worst, you've got a 1 in 3 chance of it coming back. And suddenly the sun came out and I felt better. And I feel myself, even now when I tell the story, there's a bit of a lump at the back of the throat, and I'm forever grateful to her. That was 15 years ago. And when I had the diagnosis, our much-loved daughter-in-law was expecting our first grandchild. And I remember saying I would give anything to see that baby. Well, that baby is now this tall, and she's a beautiful, long, leggy blonde, and I love her to bits. And I'm lucky, and I'm thankful every day. Something else that happens in the early days and throughout our journey is a loss of control. We're no longer in control, often, of our own destiny. It's put in the hands of others, it's put in the hands of the doctors, the medication that we're on. That dictates exactly what we can do, what we can manage. We've talked a lot about the side effects today and fatigue, that awful grinding fatigue where you can hardly bear to do anything. And that can take a lot of getting used to. We're told what we can do and what we can't do, where we can go and when. If you've got diarrhea, you don't want to be too far from the bathroom. What we do is dictated by the symptoms. We're also often limited by the work we can do, whether we've got the energy to do a full working day or the energy to do the hobbies that give us pleasure at the end of the day, especially those that require a certain amount of effort. We may even be limited where we can go on holiday. Can we get health insurance? Because for a lot of us it turns out to be extremely difficult. And can we even manage the activities of daily living? In those days when we're getting used to imatinib or whichever drug we're on, we can hardly put one foot in front of the other. Fear and anxiety follow us through our journey. When we become anxious, it affects us in 3 different ways. We get a lot of symptoms to start with, physical symptoms, some of which I had about 5 to 2 this afternoon. Heart racing, shakiness, tremor, feeling you want to go to the loo. You'll have your own pattern of symptoms. It'll affect what you think. Usually miserable, negative, worrying thoughts. I can't cope, I can't do this, it's not going to work out for me. Things that will drag us down and make us feel worse. We often have black and white thinking, seeing everything in extremes instead of the more accurate shades of grey that make up most of our lives. Very rarely is it this or that, it's usually somewhere up the middle. Catastrophizing, thinking that the worst thing that can happen will happen to us. We're just not lucky that way. focusing on negative things and ignoring the positive things. And we heard a lot about the positive things today, the treatments that are available to us, and how they're not just one, but 2, 3, 4, even more forms of treatment that may be available to us along the way. And we can jump to conclusions for which we've got no evidence at all. It also affects our behaviour, and affects what we do, or more to the point, anxiety affects what we don't do, because we find we avoid certain situations. And I was told today the story of somebody who put off reading information about GIST because they didn't quite want to know, they weren't quite ready, so they ignored it. And of course in ignoring it, yes, they ignored the bad bits, but they didn't see the good bits either. The things that might have cheered them up, they didn't get those until much later on in the day. So avoidance, while it gives us short-term relief, in the long term may not help us at all. And then there's the sadness, the loss, the grief. The loss of our old selves, because never again will you be a person who hasn't got a cancer diagnosis. That's on your notes, that's with you. You'll not be the old person again. You've had new experiences, you've thought new things, you've actually probably looked into the black hole. You may not only have lost your health, but you may have lost a way of life. The old ways have gone. There's going to be a new way now that incorporates something else, and you don't quite know what it's going to be. It's like living with the enemy. We fear that we may have lost the future that we dreamt about, perhaps the retirement that we'd planned, and weren't fearful for all that. And lost that sense of safety and security where the world seemed just an ordinary jog-along sort of place. It doesn't seem like that anymore to us. And we can lose our confidence and sense of self-esteem and feel very, very frightened, to the point where we can on occasions feel despair and hopelessness. And we need time to grieve for those losses, time to shed the tears, time to adjust to the news as best we can, whatever it may be. In extreme, about a third of us will have some form of depression. It may be fairly short-lived, but for some of us it goes on for some time. And depression, like anxiety, has a whole range of symptoms. A slowing down, we think more slowly, we move more slowly. That sad, miserable feeling that hits you, wake up in the morning, and the grey cloud descends, and there's sort of a droop in our stance and in the way we tackle life. No joy, no interest, nothing seems to get to us, bring us up anymore. The world seems very low, very flat, very grey. We may even feel guilty for doing this to our family, and feel that we don't like ourselves, we're quite critical and unkind to ourselves, we don't give ourselves a break. A loss of energy and insomnia, that inability to stay awake. Either we can't get to sleep because we're worried, or else we wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And as you know, if you've done it, every thought at 2 o'clock in the morning is miserable and negative, the product of a tired and worried mind. I mean, it's to be true, we often wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, you need to go to the bathroom, and you come back, and you still can't get to sleep. But with depression, it's night after night after night. Appetites change, and we may find we eat more, or more often eat less, and feel that grinding fatigue. This is over and above whatever you get on imatinib. And things may get so bad that you actually think it might be better if you weren't here anymore, as a measure of your despair and your feelings of hopelessness about the future. And of course you do know that there is a service available for you in any of your stages of despair, grief, sadness or anger or anxiety, and it's called the Samaritans. And they're there, yes, for when you're thinking of ending it, but there for other times as well. And their phone number is 116 123, and it's free, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. every day of the year. A diagnosis of cancer can bring loneliness and isolation. The people around us may be at a complete loss to know what to do, what to say, how to be with us. The people who cross over the road rather than talk to you. The people who don't just seize up and rush away. They've suddenly thought they've got to do something. They've got to be somewhere else, anything rather than talking to you. All of those that pretend that all is well. Oh, you'll be all right. Chin up. Since when did that help? Part of not knowing what to do or what to say comes out of love and concern to get it right. And people try to be strong. But their being strong, we may think of as indifference. They don't care. They're just carrying on as though nothing's happened. Your life is falling apart, and they're carrying on, letting the cat out and walking the dog. What's going wrong? The answer, of course, is nothing. They're just seeing it. They're trying to do what they can do. They don't know what you need. Sometimes you don't either. But it's not surprising that sometimes relationships go wrong and even break up altogether. That one or other of us become not the person we married, and we find that the relationship breaks down badly. On the other side, though, of course, we find that we have friends that we never knew. The people who actually step up and care and want to be with us and ask us how we're getting on and how was the scan and how did you get on. And they don't mind what we talk about and they don't mind if we cry. They let us do it. And those are the people who, when we don't have any light at the end of the tunnel, they'll come and sit with us in the dark. For your part, of course, you may be contributing, that you may be so frightened of sharing what's going on. You don't want to upset the people around you, so you bottle it all up. And so people think you're doing fine. You put on this bright face. How are they to know that inside you're actually caving in? And it's difficult sometimes to find the right words. I don't have any magic to offer you. We will avoid the whole subject sometimes. We don't want to talk about it because we feel it makes us upset. We'll start crying and we won't stop. By the way, that never happens. You don't ever see anybody walking along the streets unable to stop crying because they've been crying for 4 years. It doesn't happen. You may shed tears every day, but that's different. We're getting into the more difficult ones now, the ones we're less likely to talk about because you may feel incredibly angry. It's not fair. Why? Why me? Or why my daughter? Or why my mum? We've never done anything wrong. We've led a good life. We're kind to old people and animals. It's not right. And no, it's not right. But we may feel very angry and very jealous of other people. Emotions that we may be quite ashamed of inside. I think, this isn't right, this isn't nice. But then cancer isn't nice, is it? We may feel it's not convenient. It's not a good time to have cancer. I've got a wedding to go to, a baptism, my ageing parents to look after, children to look after, a new job, a holiday. I've got to have my hair done. There's never a good time, is it? And yet the diagnosis comes down like a guillotine and cuts through whatever's going on in our life, separating out the old and the new. You may not like the person you've become. You may be grumpy, snappy, irritable, difficult to approach. And it's for you to work out with your family how best to deal with that. For the most part, people find benefit in actually being on their own for a time. And that's when our family do well to avoid us. Don't come in and say, are you all right? Because no, you're not all right. But you need a bit of time to gather yourself together so you can at least put on a reasonable face and not be hurtful in what you say and say things you later regret. Other people find rather clever ways of communicating. They'll wear a bracelet or a brooch or a something or other that signals to others, I'm in a bad mood today, give me a wide berth. And if it works for you, that's just great. It's a really good way of getting the message across. A few of us may deny that you've got cancer at all. I haven't got it. I'm all right. Don't know what the doctor's on about. It's kind of calling the doctor a liar. And of course, if you take that to an extreme, of course, if you haven't got cancer, you don't take the treatment. And if you don't take the treatment, well, there's a fair old risk we know what's going to happen. That's an extreme, but it can happen. In a slightly different shape is something that Nick touched on this morning, is about that business of thinking positive. Now, some people are naturally positive thinkers, and that is brilliant, because that's a really good way of coping with what's going on, that you're pretty sure that it's all going to work out for the best. The drugs will work, the surgery will work, all will be well, it'll all turn out all right in the end. And that's wonderful. The trouble is, a lot of us can't feel like that, not with our heart and soul. We put on the phrase, say, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to be okay. But inside there's that little niggling doubt about, is it going to work out okay? And then the fear that because you're thinking like that, somehow you'll make the worst outcome happen. You won't, but there's that concern. I had a cousin who was determined that everything was fine. She was in hospital having had actually a mastectomy. And she said she was fine. Now, if that's fine, I'd like to see what isn't fine, to be honest. And I wonder how she would cope if it turned out not to be fine. There are also times when we may give up altogether and give in to that feeling of despair, sometimes just for a few days, sometimes more permanently. And this isn't good in the long term, because if you're in despair, you may not do the things that would help, you may do the things that don't help. Turn to drink, illegal drugs, taking to your bed, not doing the things that would help you, like taking the painkillers or taking the imatinib or whatever it may be. So what to do? As I said at the beginning, you're the expert on you. I cannot believe that there's a single person in this room who has never been through any stress, any loss, any struggle, any disappointment. You came through it then, and you know how you did it. You were there. And it's just the same now, only perhaps a bit bigger. And the same coping strategies that you had then will stand you in very good stead now. And don't be afraid to draw on them. However crack-brained they may seem to other people, never mind them. This is you we're talking about. So how do you usually cope? Do you go out and walk the dog? Do you go in the garden? Do you play sport? Perhaps you play a musical instrument. Time alone. Perhaps you pray. Whatever it is, you carry on doing it. It's good for you. There are other things outside you, of course, that will help. There are various therapies. We've already touched on those a little bit this morning. If you're feeling an overwhelming anxiety or unhappiness and depression, go and see your GP or your oncologist. You won't be the first person, I promise you, that's come to them feeling anxious or upset. And you'll find they will probably prescribe you some medication. And don't be frightened to take it. Check that it doesn't clash with whatever drugs you're on, and then go for it. Because it'll be a crutch, it'll help you through the day, help you to cope for the short term, help you to get through this particularly bad patch of yours. There is also cognitive behaviour therapy that had enormous press not so very long ago, when it was said that it cured just about everything from ingrowing toenails onwards. It doesn't, but it's a very, very useful tool, because it'll help you cope with those negative thoughts that run away with you, that get out of control and drag you down and make you feel worried and even more miserable than you were. It'll help you manage your behaviour and help you control and live more of a life that you want to live. And the other big thing that will help you along the way is joining various self-help groups. And lo and behold, you have. You're here. And this is one of the best forms of support and treatment and help you will ever have. Because you're in the company of people who know exactly what it's all about, who've trodden the path either before you or behind you, have got a wealth of experience and knowledge about whatever you're going through. Some of them will have had it too. And they won't be boastful about it, but they will do it in a sense of support and care. So there are also some positive things that can come out. A diagnosis of cancer sharpens the mind, doesn't it? It causes us to have different priorities. We can concentrate our time and energy and effort on the things and the people and the experiences that really matter, and shed the things that actually are rather trivial and really don't matter to us at all. We can recalibrate and make sure that whatever time we have left, may it be many, many years, is spent in the way that we want to spend it and not wasted on things that we later regret. We may even make some very large life changes, a change of job, a change of house, sometimes even a change of partner. The next few slides are those writings of a gentleman called Michael Seers, who will be familiar to a lot of you as a very dear friend and a GIST patient. And he used to post on listserv phrases and words that were of huge comfort and support to so many people. And I've selected one particular posting he made many years ago, which put it all together far better than I ever could. So I will go down the list fairly slowly to give you time and have a read and a bit of a think. You're absolutely under no obligation to come to terms with GIST, to be positive, to pull yourself together, to look on the bright side, to be optimistic. You're under no obligation to meditate, pray, be understanding of your difficult situation, put on a brave face, carefully consider all the options. You don't have to pretend that everything in the garden is rosy. You don't have to be stoical or heroic. You don't have to tell the world and its wife your latest scan results. You don't have to take the heed of the advice of friends and family, however well they may mean it. You don't have to even to fight the illness or get better, unless you really want to. You have full permission to get angry, cry buckets, feel fed up, sulk, tell everyone, including those trying to help you, to get lost. And to tell the same people you need them after all, to be totally inconsistent, to bore people rigid with your problems, to shake a fist or a stick at God, to grieve for the good old days when you knew that only other people got cancer. You have the right to rant and rave at the unfairness of it all, to moan and groan, especially when the side effects of your medication are kicking in. The right to be ill and the right to eat that bar of chocolate, all in one go. In short, you have the right to be a human being, but just don't do all of the above, all at once, and not in the vicinity of your best china. Thank you, Michael. So I'm coming to the end now, and I just want 3 things to say for you to remember. First of all, don't forget, you're normal. It's the situation that you're in with a diagnosis of cancer that is abnormal. You're the normal one. be gentle with yourself. And above all, you're not alone.